Hey guys, this is Christopher Brower here with Daily Motor, and today we're driving a 2021 Jaguar F-Type R convertible, the most villainous two-seater convertible on the market right now. It's absolutely savage, and this particular example is finished in the 3 different shades of brown. We've got this beautiful metallic root beer color on the outside, we've got a tan roof, and then on the inside, a beautiful shade of saddle or cognac or peanut butter or whatever you want to call it. It looks fantastic. A lot of people hate on brown cars, but in this configuration I think it looks really proper. The Jaguar F-Type and Jaguars in general are never really like a mass bought vehicle. They're very specialized, and it oftentimes makes you think, who is actually buying these cars and keeping them in business? But whoever you are, thank you so much, because we just got done driving this car for the past week, and it has been one of the most special cars I've ever driven. We've enjoyed our time in it very much, and I'm excited to take you guys out on the road in it today. But before we do that, let's do a little bit of a walk around of this Jaguar F-Type. I'll show you the interior, show you under the hood, and then we'll go out for a drive. Well, I've already done a brief walk around. This car looks mostly the same as it always has. It has undergone a mild facelift in the past year or two. They've made the headlights skinnier at the front. The whole front of the car just sort of sits a little bit lower. I think it looks even more menacing than it did before. They've done a good job, and the overall F-Type styling is still there. This car is still very recognizable as an F-Type. So being that this is the R, under the hood of this car, which, as you'll see in a second, opens the correct way. Haha, check that out. Just like an E-Type, which, you know, obviously it makes sense that it opens like this. But the beating heart of this beast is a 5-liter supercharged V8 with 575 horsepower and 516 foot-pounds of torque. They did a good job with this engine cover and just making this all look very clean. See how it looks from the front. Oh yeah, why don't all hoods open like this? It's such a cool look. BMW used to do this in the 80s, and then they stopped for some reason. But check that out. All of that 575 horsepower is sent through a ZF 8-speed automatic to all 4 wheels. In this current market, this current lineup, the R is only available in all-wheel drive, but if you'd like a rear-wheel drive version of the F-Type, you can have it. It's the same size V8, it just makes a little bit less power. So if you want it in rear-wheel drive, you have to do with only 444 horsepower. Still plenty of power to rip your face off. All right, so this hood is a little bit tricky. Ooh, okay, you've really got to slam it, or else it is unhappy with how it is latched. Walk around the other side, make sure it latched over here. Yes, it appears that it has. Walking around to the back here, we've got some very menacing quad tips. We've got our R badge there on the right, and really just a very familiar overall look. We've got some active Aero, black Jaguar badge, that looks good. The trunk size is actually pretty decent. You've got some room under here, and then you've also got room down here, and I apologize for the things in here. There are some leftovers from our road trip. There's some sunscreen, and Charlie bought a cookbook or something. But it shows that you do have some room in this boot. It's certainly bigger than the boot on the Lexus LC500, so that is a positive thing. The actual trunk lid itself, it's pretty lightweight. When you shut it, it's not super confidence-inspiring. It feels like it doesn't latch, but don't worry, the car will yell at you if it doesn't. Man, I just want to spend this whole review walking around the outside of this thing. It is that gorgeous. And when I was reading the window sticker before this showed up and I saw that it was brown, I was a little bit disappointed, but now I wouldn't want it any other way. It's just so proper. All right, let's go ahead and hop inside the F-Type, and we'll drop the roof so you can get a better look at this interior. Yeah, okay. So before we start the engine, I know I'm holding out on you a little bit here. We're gonna put the roof down so we can get the full experience when we start this thing up. The roof folds down remarkably quick. I mean, it's like 10 seconds or less. I suppose you can time it when you're watching the video. Take a look at this interior. Beautiful sport seats, tons of detail, white stitching, a quilted design here up on the top. a silver Jaguar plaque here, or a little pass-through for some air on your back or your neck. And yes, just a very, very attractive interior. Not too different than this car has been all along. They did a few changes when they facelifted the car, but overall, this thing has looked pretty much the same since it came out. So let's fire this up so you can hear the supercharged 5-liter V8 come to life. So there you go, the same menacing sound that you get from this JLR 5-liter supercharged V8. In this setting, it sounds fantastic, especially when you're under load. It doesn't sound really the best or the most threatening when you're just sitting and revving it, because it has a soft limiter at about 4,000 RPM. But once you get out on the road, it sounds absolutely crazy. So I'm excited to take you guys out on the road. I've got my earmuffs today, so we'll be running top down for the review. You'll be able to hear all the good V8 sounds. The glove box, you open that with a button, which feels very, very nice. I will say, before I continue with the rest of the interior tour, it's very interesting to see where Jaguar put their money in this interior. For instance, this button, Jaguar established in 1935. A very, very quality item, though I will worry that in the future you may not have access to your glove box. Continuing, very nice stitching along the dash, the center console here, and the door panels. We've got a very nice steering wheel with our 12 o'clock marker stitched there, perforated leather on the side, and of course paddle shifters mounted on the back. The center console, it's not very big, but it does fit a walkie-talkie and my wallet, so that's positive. But it just feels very cheap when it shuts and you don't have confirmation that it's latching. This is nice, cup holders that you can cover with this cubby door. That feels like a pretty quality item. Parking brake here, which looks identical to the convertible top button. Yes, I have done it, and it was terrifying. Seat controls are over here on the door panel, just like a Mercedes-Benz, so that's pretty nice to see. They actually work quite well, but you can't just adjust them slightly. They do move quite a bit further than I would want them to with just one push. Power adjust steering column as well, which makes Charlie very happy. Climate control knobs are the same as any other Jaguar Land Rover product here. You can see they're pretty easy to use, push to turn on and off, and your temperatures are on the left and right. AC switch here, along with some other toggle switches. Infotainment screen is pretty much impossible to see when you have the top down, and you'll see that when the sun is facing behind us, that it just becomes totally glazed over and impossible to see. Even right now, it's pretty hard to see. I don't know how that shows up on camera, but it is nearly impossible. We've got a adjuster right here for our drive mode. So right now I am in dynamic mode. You can adjust your settings for dynamic mode. So I've got engine and gear shift in their most aggressive settings, and then I've got steering and suspension in comfort. This is the best thing you can really do for driving around on the street. But if you still want to be a menace to society, you can make sure your engine is as loud as possible. Okay, cool. So I don't think I'm going to show you anything else here in this menu, because why do you care? You just want to hear this Jaguar make some farting noises. I've got the loud exhaust turned on, but to be honest with you, that button really doesn't make any difference. This car is loud even if you have the exhaust in quiet mode. We've got some active aero here. I will show you what that looks like, and then we'll go for a drive. Pretty similar to just any active aero that you get on a Porsche or anything else. Looks pretty neat. It automatically deploys around 45-50 miles per hour, so that is pretty neat. You can see it back down flush there. All right. All right, bear with me for a second while I roll our windows up and also put on my earmuffs. I'm not going to waste your time driving this thing in comfort mode or snow rain mode. We're going to stay in dynamic mode and make some really good noises here today. 8-speed automatic, as I said earlier, pretty decently functioning shifter. If you can see the screen there, we do have a reverse camera. Pretty nice click there into drive. Go away, go away. Oh, and now he's just further in the car. Bump it over to the left for manual mode. We're going to start out in manual mode today, just for reasons. The exhaust on this car is kind of strange in the way that it is actually pretty quiet, under 3,500 RPM. However, when you hit 3,500, that happens. It's just so hilarious, especially if you have trees and other things to bounce it off of. All right, I'm gonna shut up, just listen. All right, we've caught up to some traffic. So, yeah, it sounds insane, and it's intoxicating to drive it this way. In fact, the majority of the time that I've been driving this car, I have been driving it in dynamic mode, in manual mode, because it's just so satisfying. I cannot believe that Jaguar is allowed to sell a car that does this. I can't believe it, but I love it. Get out of my way. I sometimes wonder if it scares the people that you pass, like if you're doing a gear shift while you pass somebody, it freaks them out. Anyways though, the application of this ZF 8-speed in this F-Type, it's just perfect. I always say that this transmission pretty much makes every car they put it in just that much better. This F-Type is no exception. Absolutely lightning fast gear changes. And if you haven't heard already, 90% of your shifts make the loudest snap, crack, fart, whatever you want to call it, in the world. I've never driven another car with this transmission that makes that much of a noise between shifts. It's just hilarious. Oh my goodness. Going over the rough ride section here, suspension is in comfort mode. To be honest with you, the ride is really nice. And you may look at this car and think that, oh, it probably rides like crap and they've just set it up for handling, but honestly, it's not too bad of a grand tourer in the suspension department. And honestly, when you have this thing in comfort mode and in automatic, you could just drive it. That is, of course, unless you want to actually navigate somewhere, because as you can probably see now that have the sun pointed at the screen, it's mostly useless. You can't see anything on there. And this elbow rest on the door panel, it's very stiff. So if you want to rest your elbow here to sort of drive like this, after about 5 minutes, your elbow gets very sore. So those couple of things make it not that great of a grand tourer, but everything else, the ride, the steering feel, which when you're in comfort isn't too bad. However, when you're in sport, it's very fast and very twitchy. But if you leave it in its proper settings, it's fine. As far as like wind buffeting goes, when you have the top down, that's quite fine as well. It's definitely not as quiet as a Lexus LC500, but it's not so bad with the windows up. You've got a little wind deflector back there, as you can see. I'll show you a little bit better once we stop up here. So there's that wind deflector right there. It does help quite a bit. And we do have auto stop start here in our 5-liter supercharged V8. Of course, that helps you save lots of money. Okay, back down into dynamic mode and manual here for our entrance ramp. If you haven't gathered this already, you can shift this car down here, which is nice. I like when you're able to shift the car with something other than the paddle shifters. Remarkably light steering, and even though this car is all-wheel drive, it does feel very rear bias. Yes! There's just hilarious amounts of power and torque in every gear, no matter what RPM you're at. And the power delivery, there's no lag or any sort because, of course, it's supercharged and not turbocharged. So you've just got power everywhere. I mean, okay, here we go, 2,500 RPM. And it's just pulling. Look at that. Truly a masterpiece of a powertrain in this F-Type. And the power and torque is not the only benefit. I drove this car about 300 miles home yesterday from our long road trip, and I averaged on the highway with an average speed of 73 miles per hour, 29.5 mpg as indicated by the car. And even if the car was being generous and this thing was only getting 27, 28, for a nearly 600 horsepower supercharged V8 that sounds like that, I mean, how can you complain? Nearly 30 miles per gallon on this thing on the highway. EPA is, I believe, 24. So if the car was reading correctly, we did beat EPA by quite a bit there. Oh. Now, you may remember, back a few years ago, Jaguar was running a campaign during the Super Bowl and sometime after, with a bunch of very well-known movie villains, and the whole point of the commercial series was to put the point across that Jaguars are driven by villains. And I understand that now. I got a small taste of that in the F-Pace SVR, but now that I've driven the F-Type R, it just makes so much sense. It's such a villainous car. It's such a baddie car. If I was ever gonna make an action movie, the villain would drive an F-Type. It's the only choice. Oh, there's just something so sinister and evil about the F-Type, and I love it so much. You don't get that with many cars nowadays. Oh boy, it is bumpy up here. I just like to imagine I'm chasing Mr. Bond in his Aston Martin DBS. Certainly wouldn't be able to sneak around in this car. You'd be a very defined villain. They'd always know where you were. I think we should stop here and do a launch. Sport transmission mode, we're going to leave traction on and everything. Automatic. I just want to see how this thing will get off the line here. There was 0 to 67. Jaguar claimed a 0 to 60 time of about 3.5 seconds, and I believe them. It feels just about that fast, so pretty cool stuff. What else? Well, these vents, you push this button, they... Wait for it. Yeah, they sink into the dashboard for a more sleek look. And then when you want your air on, they emerge out. Jaguar always does things like this. If you'll remember, the old XF and some of the older Jaguar products had a dial shifter that rose out of the center console when you would start the vehicle. So they like to have things that emerge. Yeah, honestly, I could have just spent 2 minutes in this review not even talking and just driving around and letting you listen to the exhaust, and I think that the same point would have come across. It's a very fun, very intoxicating, very special car. And I love that they still make it. The funniest part to me about the F-Type is that you used to be able to have this car with a 6-cylinder. Well, not anymore. You've got two choices, a supercharged V8 or a supercharged V8. So hopefully you're okay making noises like that, because they're your only choice now in 2022. This car, I hope I didn't say 2022 at the beginning. This particular car is a 2021, but I don't think it makes any difference, so we'll just gloss over it for now. And before we sum this car up for the day, let's just briefly touch on price. Well, the base model rear-wheel drive F-Type P450 starts at 77 grand, and as I mentioned earlier, you still get a V8 with 444 horsepower. However, if you want the R model with 575 horsepower, you've got to pay a little bit more. This one is $120,000, and while this is a very, very good and special car, I don't know that I would pay $120,000 for it. I think right around the $100,000 mark is pretty appropriate. And luckily you can have that P450 rear-wheel drive for just under $80,000. And I think that that might be the best option, because you still get a V8. Plus you get rear-wheel drive, which means you can do donuts and other things. All right, guys. Well, that's going to wrap it up for us today with the Jaguar F-Type R. Overall, a freaking fantastic car. I love this thing so much. I would love to add one to my stable someday. And the good news is you can have an older one for around the $40,000 to $50,000 range. So if you don't want to go all out and get a brand new one, they are pretty present on the used car market, though I will say I haven't checked values in a couple of years, and the used car market has taken a turn for the worse. So who knows, these things could be 50, 60 grand used, but still a cracking deal if you can get a used one for the right price. And overall, just a really, really fantastic car. It speaks for itself. I don't need to give you a super detailed explanation here. It's a very, very special car. If you want to see more on the F-Type R, we will have a couple more videos on this, and it will be featured in our GT car road trip video. It's a video unlike anything we've done before, and I don't know when that video will be out. We had an actual film crew and a production team put the video together for us, and it does feature this Jaguar. So if you want to see more on this car, as well as the Lexus LC500, the BMW M4 Cabriolet, and the Mini Cooper John Cooper Works convertible, make sure you check that video out. It will be out sometime this year. So really exciting stuff here, and well, I was happy to take you guys for a ride with me today in this F-Type R. And if you're the person that's actually buying this car, thank you. I don't know who you are, but you're an absolute hero. So thank you all so much for watching. This has been Christopher Brower here with Daily Motor, and as always, drive on.